Apparently, seen from the outside, my composed, sometimes monotonous little family, nothing changed. Nothing had changed. The problematic child remained the same. The working father was always the same example of a responsible and faithful head of family. The mother continued to prove to be a housewife, attentive to cleaning the house, to the children's clothing, to household expenses, to be balanced for each end of month. What more could I wish for? Rereading this last episode of violence that would have marked my life forever, I realized that I have not described it well. What is all the trauma I felt? What is the unspeakable cruelty that I experienced from what should have become the pillars on which to base my adult life? Nobody can imagine it from the outside. Nobody. Once again, now alone with my destiny, I forced myself to take refuge in my inner world. I stopped talking at home altogether, didn't say a word to my father or mother for the next 6 or 7 years. Matteo also got involved, but it was easy to let him go too, when the games between brothers had already stopped forever due to Pietro's departure. I began to express myself with little cards and lip-smacking words at least with my mother in the days and weeks that followed. My parents accepted the change without much fuss. I think they were afraid that I would divulge their scene for violence with teachers and family. But I, for one, was too horrified not to want to remove it from my conscience as soon as possible. There would be only silence. Over the years, when relatives began to notice my strange behavior with my parents during their visit or when we were together with grandparents, my mother always played down everything by relating it to some of my childhood whims. After I was grown up, she called them mental, but the result didn't change. It should be noted that with relatives, including aunts and cousins, I continue to show myself as the subdued and judicious child kid that I had always been. My mother would have persevered in mocking me behind my back, um, and describing me as a rancorous and uncivilized boy, to the point of not speaking to her. But I hope that at least among my family there'd be someone intelligent enough to guess the truth, and the monster hidden in the attitude of common hypocrisy. My grandmothers wasted no time to getting me to the third grade after my parents complained to their parents about my quirk of silence. Um, how could I explain to two elderly women who, in any case, would always have sided with their children, that I kept silent? That if I kept silent, it was in order not to report them, not to blow up a powder keg that perhaps would have been extinguished only in a bath of tears and blood. Well, yes, in all the years of my adolescence, I always dreamed of making my parents pay. I wanted to kill them, tear them apart, make them disappear from the face of the earth. I prayed to God to make me resist, because I was adult enough to understand that there would be no other family to take me in if I got rid of these burdens with some confidence if I had even had it, trapped in a poisonous family unit, and which I ended up with self-imposed. I tried to study for years in the room among piles of books that would only accumulate and become dusty. I only went back to my room to sleep late in the evening. I also began to take my meals by myself, especially when we moved home, and I must have been about 17 years old. I finally conquered the room all to myself. Apparently this was how my emancipation from my family of monsters was accomplished. On closer inspection, that was only the final stage of an evolution that would have made me disappear from the world, burying me in a sort of ghostly existence, invisible to most, which still lasts today. New studies, new proof. I have already mentioned that those of high school, from a cultural point of view, were the most tiring years of my life. I shone in every subject, but on the condition that I stay up in the small hours on books that and be ruined by my own emotionality. From the moment I trembled at every judgment of the teacher. A mistake would have been to fall from the top of the virtual tower on which I needed to be, on pain of being forced or ostracized by the last world, where I was still allowed to stay. My teachers lured me into a dimension in which I was deaf if I were a child, even if they never exceeded the level of cold complacency towards me, made of good judgments and grades always above 7. I could have asked them for help in escaping from a family trap that would soon cut my already weak character in two. But unfortunately, there weren't many approaches. Although based in a large and spacious building, my high school was already in decline. Its teachers were almost all elderly and close to retirement. The figure of a psychologist was missing. He was called by my surname, and no one. I was called by my surname, and no one cared what happened in my life just outside the gates of the institute. My companions were often carried away by a restlessness and anxiety of the rebellion of the age in hormonal turmoil. Every morning protects rose for a strike or for a group absence. I didn't even have the courage to listen to the reasons. I went to school because it was established that I would do it, because I didn't like to go home earlier than necessary, because I deluded myself that in this way the teachers would love me more than the others. It turned out not to be so, at least on the last point. It was not long before I discovered that my high school professor saw those mass strike as an opportunity to go home sooner. Once my Italian teacher scolded me bitterly for forcing her to sit at the teacher's desk when I was in the wall building, was the only student to enter, and was the only student to enter the school. I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't know where to go. I had no friends to skip school with. Sitting in an empty classroom, which was the perfect copy of my daily life at home, leaning at my desk among those weighty papers. I don't regret those years of desperate forced study. In hindsight, I would be inclined to support any degree of the Ministry of Education that provided students any grade was from studying too many hours at home. Even the study, and not just declamations in the classroom, should be supervised by the teachers or qualified staff. As with religion, even with education, I was left to myself. You exaggerated, and I ruined my health and life. I studied, and never knowing when and how to stop, not being a genius, and therefore not endowed with those mnemonic faculties that facilitate the learning from a few gifted and fortunate students. I needed twice time to memorize lessons that would have amazed the teachers of my talent. Soon in school, the rumor spread that I was some kind of phenomenon, when in reality, by studying on only the right hours, I would have easily confused myself with the crowd. Why then privilege, adore, and condition students who ruin their backs and backs all the time in their notebooks? Why not devote only the right number of hours to studying, and perhaps make it compulsory to go to gyms or a certain number of daily physical exercises? Perhaps this aspect of adolescence is underestimated because it is taken for granted that children prefer time to study. It would not occur to anyone that the opposite could also be the case, namely that of students who, due to personal and social problems, closes in a tower of pseudo-lawful culture, managing only to marginalized and become a failure in his life in any working and practical field in general. That's all for this video. See you to the next one.